I caught them. Not just suspected. Not just feared. I caught them. Her legs were wrapped around him like I used to hold her when we danced in the kitchen. His hands. Those same hands I once trusted with my secrets. Gripping her waist like she was his lifeline. And their eyes? Locked. No shame. No panic. Just desire. As if I didn't exist. It wasn't even in some seedy hotel room. No. It was my apartment. My couch. The home I built with her, with our pictures on the walls and the scent of her perfume still hanging in the air. The same walls that had heard me say, "I love you," 1,000 times. The same floor I had knelt on a year ago. Ring in hand, heart on sleeve. Let me back up. You deserve the full story. All of it. Because betrayal doesn't happen in one moment. It's a slow poison. And sometimes you drink it willingly because you don't want to believe the truth. Her name was Jenna. We met in college, one of those rainy, caffeine-fueled nights in the library. She was a psych major with messy notes and wild hair. And I was a business student trying to act like I wasn't completely floored by her smile. She was chaotic, passionate, unpredictable. I was grounded, careful, quiet. We clicked like fire to gasoline. And then there was Matt, my best friend since 5th grade. We grew up playing backyard football, sneaking out to house parties, pulling all-nighters before exams. He knew my fears, my crushes, my darkest thoughts. He was more than a friend, he was a brother. The kind of guy you take a bullet for, because you just assume he'd do the same. I introduced them. Of course I did. Why wouldn't I? Jenna was the love of my life and Matt was my other half. The three of us became inseparable: weekend trips, game nights, endless laughter. Sometimes I'd even joke, "If I die, you two better take care of each other." I didn't realize I was handing them permission. Looking back, there were signs. Little things I ignored. The way she laughed harder at his jokes than mine. The way his eyes lingered a second too long when she walked into the room. Inside jokes I wasn't part of. But I trusted them. God, I trusted them. Until that night. It was supposed to be a surprise. Jenna had been distant for weeks. Blaming work stress. Saying she needed space. I thought maybe a weekend away would help, so I planned a getaway to the lake house. I left work early. Picked up her favorite wine. Even stopped to get that overpriced cheese she liked. I was excited. Nervous. Hopeful. I walked through the door. Expecting silence. What I heard was moaning. At first I thought the TV was on. Or maybe a neighbor. But as I stepped inside, it became clear. Too clear. Her voice. His name. Over and over. I dropped the bag. It hit the floor like a gunshot and they froze. She looked at me first. Eyes wide, mouth open. She stammered something. I don't even remember what. Matt turned, pulling away from her like it made any difference. His face went pale. He tried to speak, but I didn't let him. I walked out. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't punch anything, even though every cell in my body was screaming. I just walked. I think my brain shut off. I ended up at a park, sitting on a bench for hours, staring at nothing. And that was the night I realized something that would haunt me for a long, long time. Sometimes the people you die for are the ones holding the knife. The days that followed felt like a fever dream. Foggy, disjointed, cruel in their clarity. I didn't go back to the apartment right away. Couldn't. Every corner of that place was haunted now. Her laugh echoing in the hallway. Her perfume on the sheets. Her toothbrush still next to mine. The thought of sleeping in the same bed they'd defiled made my skin crawl. Instead, I crashed at a motel near the highway, cheap, cold, impersonal. Which was exactly what I needed. I didn't want warmth. I didn't want memories. I just wanted numbness. Matt tried to call. So did Jenna. At first, I let the phone ring out. Then I blocked them both. But it didn't stop the messages. Voicemails, emails, even handwritten letters slid under the motel room door. Desperate apologies, explanations, lies wrapped in ribbon. Jenna said it just happened. That they were drunk. That it didn't mean anything. Matt said he never meant to hurt me. That he fucked up. That he was ashamed. Ashamed. That was the word that made my stomach turn. Not sorry. Not heartbroken. just ashamed like a teenager caught stealing gum. But I wasn't angry yet. Not really. Anger would have been a relief. No, what I felt was emptier than that. It was like someone had scooped out my insides and left a hollow echo in my chest. I kept replaying it in my head. That moment when I saw them. Her legs around him. His face buried in her neck. The way they moved together like they'd done it before. That's what gnawed at me. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't one drunken slip. This was something that had history, routine, intimacy. Something I hadn't seen because I was too busy loving them both. Eventually, I went back to the apartment. I had to. My lease was still there, my clothes, my laptop, my life. Jenna wasn't there when I arrived. Thank God. But her scent was. Her presence clung to everything. I packed methodically, without emotion, like I was boxing up someone else's belongings. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just moved like a man under hypnosis. When I found the bracelet I gave her on our second anniversary, tucked in a drawer beside a pair of cheap lingerie panties that weren't mine, I didn't feel anything. Not even sadness. Just fatigue. Like betrayal had drained even the capacity to feel betrayed. She came home later that night. I was still packing the last of my books when I heard the key turn. My spine stiffened. I didn't want to see her. I wasn't ready. But I couldn't hide either. I stood there, frozen, as she stepped through the door and saw me. Her face crumpled. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in a week. Eyes puffy, lips trembling. She whispered my name like it was a prayer. Or a curse. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said. And I hated how familiar her voice still felt in my ears. Then why did it? I asked, my voice low, steady, detached. Why him? Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. I don't know, she said. It wasn't about him. It was about me. About us. We were drifting. Drifting. As if she hadn't had a choice. As if fucking my best friend was a side effect of emotional distance. As if her betrayal was a current she'd been carried away by, helpless and innocent. You could have told me, I said. You could have left. I didn't want to lose you, she whispered. And that was the cruelest part of all. Because she already had. I didn't shout. I didn't call her names. I didn't ask for details. I just picked up the last box, walked past her, and left. And as the door closed behind me, something inside me snapped. Not with noise, not with rage, but with quiet finality. Like a thread pulled too tight for too long, finally giving way. That was the moment I realized. Love isn't always destroyed by hate. Sometimes it dies in silence. In the weeks that followed, people started noticing something was off. I stopped showing up to work on time. I skipped the gym. I didn't return calls or messages from friends who had no idea what was going on. Even my parents sensed something and left voicemails I couldn't bring myself to listen to. I was existing, not living. Going through the motions with a hollow chest and a face I barely recognized in the mirror. I had dark circles under my eyes, a permanent 5 o'clock shadow, and a kind of stillness in my expression that made strangers avoid my gaze. It's strange how visible heartbreak can become, even when you're trying so hard to hide it. Matt, of course, was silent. After I blocked him, he didn't push. I think he knew there was nothing he could say that wouldn't make it worse. But silence wasn't an escape. It was a sentence. Every moment without closure, without confrontation, felt like a weight pressing deeper into my ribs. I kept imagining him going about his life, playing basketball with the guys, maybe still laughing at dumb inside jokes Jenna once found funny. Did he think of me? Did he lie awake, racked with guilt? Or was he already over it? Glad to have her. Glad I was out of the way? I started journaling, not because I wanted to heal but because I needed to get the poison out of me somehow. I'd open a notebook and just let the words pour out. Raw, unfiltered, ugly. Pages and pages filled with memories that now felt tainted. The night we all went camping and drank too much whiskey around the fire. That time Jenna got sick and Matt helped me carry her to the car. Like the perfect friend. All those photos, those smiles. None of it felt real anymore. It was like my life had been rewritten behind my back, and I was the only one who hadn't received the new script. I wondered how long it had been going on. Weeks? Months? Longer? Had they laughed at me behind closed doors? Whispered in corners while I stood oblivious in the same room. I tortured myself with those questions, even though the answers wouldn't change anything. Betrayal isn't just about what they did. It's about how deeply they lied while pretending to still love you. One night, I drank too much. Alone in a dim bar where no one knew my name, nursing whiskey after whiskey until my thoughts got loud enough to drown everything else out. That's when the idea hit me. I needed to see him, not to fight, not to scream, but to look him in the eyes and ask the one question that kept me awake at night. Why? I knew where he lived. A small apartment near downtown, 3rd floor, with a broken porch light and a doorbell that didn't work. I waited until late, around midnight, because I didn't want an audience. I walked up those stairs like I was marching to an execution. My palms were sweating, my throat dry. I had no plan, just pain and 100 unanswered questions. He opened the door wearing an old hoodie and surprise. Real surprise. Like he hadn't expected to ever see me again. His eyes widened and for a moment we just stared at each other. Two men who once shared everything, now separated by a betrayal neither of us could pretend didn't happen. Can we talk? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. He stepped aside without a word. His place was a mess, beer cans, pizza boxes, clothes on the floor. It reeked of someone who'd been avoiding reality. He motioned for me to sit, but I didn't. I stood in the middle of the room, arms crossed, heart pounding. I just want to know, I said. How long? And why? He ran a hand through his hair and sighed. It started a couple months ago. After that night we all went to that concert. You passed out early, remember? We stayed up talking. Too much wine. One thing led to another. I flinched. Not visibly, but inside, something cracked. A memory that once felt harmless now twisted into something foul. I didn't mean for it to happen, man, he said. It wasn't planned. But then it kept happening. And we didn't know how to stop. She's not yours, I said, barely above a whisper. You were supposed to be my brother. He looked down. I know. And I hate myself for it. I stared at him for a long time. Looking for remorse. Looking for something, anything that would make this hurt less. But there's no good reason to betray someone who trusted you completely. I didn't hit him. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. My fists were clenched so tight I could feel my nails digging into my palms. Every instinct in me screamed for violence, for something physical to match the chaos boiling inside my chest. But I didn't raise a hand. Because somehow hitting him would have made it easier for him. Would have given him permission to feel like he paid for it. I didn't want to give him that. I wanted him to live with the guilt. To carry it, heavy and constant, like I carried the weight of their betrayal every second of every day. I trusted you with my life, I said quietly, not because I lacked rage, but because the rage had burned through and left only ash behind. There's no coming back from this. He didn't try to defend himself again. Maybe he finally understood there was nothing left to say. The damage was done. The bridge wasn't just burned, it was bombed, collapsed, buried under rubble. And all the years we'd spent building it, every shared memory, every childhood secret, every night we laughed until we cried, none of it mattered now. It was all poisoned. I turned and left. Didn't slam the door. Didn't say goodbye. Just walked out into the night like a ghost, the air sharp and cold on my skin. My chest felt tighter than ever, like grief had settled there permanently. But something was shifting too, something quiet and unfamiliar. It wasn't closure. It wasn't peace. It was survival. The barest flicker of it. Like the first breath after nearly drowning. I didn't go back to the motel. I drove aimlessly for hours, letting the highway swallow me whole. Somewhere around 3 a.m. I pulled into an old diner, half dead from exhaustion and too wired to sleep. The waitress didn't ask questions. Just poured me coffee and offered a warm smile. That somehow almost broke me. It was the first act of kindness I'd felt in weeks. I stayed there until the sky turned gray. Watched old men read newspapers, truckers sip black coffee, a couple kids in hoodies arguing over pancakes. Life was moving. The world was still spinning. That realization felt both cruel and strangely comforting. My world had ended, but the rest of the universe hadn't noticed. And maybe in that there was something freeing. I went home the next morning. Not to the apartment, no. I'd already canceled the lease. Jenna had sent me a long, rambling email offering to move out and give me space. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Some things are better left unanswered. I went to my parents' place instead. My childhood bedroom was untouched, posters still on the wall, trophies still gathering dust. It felt like stepping back into a time when things were simpler, when love didn't come with knives behind backs and secrets under bedsheets. My mom didn't ask questions. She just hugged me. Held me like I was still a kid who'd scraped his knee, not a man gutted by betrayal. I broke down in her arms. Let it all out, the anger, the confusion, the loss. She didn't say much. Just let me fall apart. And sometimes that's all we need. Someone to hold the pieces when we're too shattered to put them back together. Over the next few days, I started to breathe again. Slowly. Awkwardly. But the fog began to lift. I deleted old photos. Unfollowed them both. Took long walks without a destination. I didn't know who I was without Jenna. Without Matt. But maybe for the first time in years I had a chance to find out. The thing about betrayal is this: it changes you. It doesn't just end a relationship. It ends a version of yourself, the one who believed, who trusted, who loved without question. And you mourn that version. You bury him. And then you start again. Healing doesn't come with warning signs or fanfare. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or grand revelations. It's quiet. Subtle. It happens in the small things, when you make coffee and realize you didn't think of her, when a song plays on the radio and you don't have to switch it off immediately, when you look in the mirror and see something more than just a man who was betrayed. That's how it started for me. Not with forgiveness, not with peace, but with distance. Emotional and physical. Space between what was and what could still be. I got a new job. Nothing glamorous, just a logistics coordinator position at a mid-sized warehouse company. But it was something to focus on, something that didn't remind me of them. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of the city, just one bedroom, minimal furniture, but it was mine. Every wall, every corner untouched by old memories. I filled the space with things I liked. My colors. My taste. No compromises. I didn't realize how much I'd given up in that relationship until I had the freedom to make decisions without asking someone else what they thought. For a long time, I didn't date. Couldn't. The thought of letting someone in again, of trusting, of being vulnerable, it made my stomach turn. I saw couples at cafes and felt a bitter mix of envy and pity. Envy because I missed the closeness. Pity because I knew how fast it could all fall apart. How easily someone you love could become a stranger wearing a familiar face. I started therapy. That was a turning point. My therapist, Susan, a calm woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue, didn't let me wallow. She didn't offer platitudes or cheap comfort. She made me dig. Made me question why I didn't see it coming, why I blamed myself, why I was still haunted by the image of them together. We unpacked everything: my childhood patterns, my tendency to avoid conflict, the way I ignored red flags because I loved too hard, too blindly. It was brutal. But it helped. One session, she asked me something I'll never forget. If you could sit in front of Jenna right now, without anger, without fear, what would you say? I stared at her, stunned. I hadn't thought of it like that. Not without rage. Not without pain. I sat there in silence for a long time, then finally whispered I'd ask her if she ever really loved me, or if I was just a placeholder until something more exciting came along. Susan nodded, like she'd been waiting for that. And what if the answer is yes? That question haunted me for days. Because the truth is, love doesn't always look like loyalty. People can love you and still hurt you. They can mean the words in the moment and still betray you the next. It took me a while to accept that Jenna may have loved me in her own fractured, inconsistent way, but that didn't excuse what she did. And it didn't mean I had to carry her anymore. Months passed. The seasons changed. Summer faded into a cold, sobering fall. One night, I ran into an old mutual friend at a grocery store, someone who used to be part of our trio's larger circle. She was awkward, hesitant, but curious. After a minute of small talk, she blurted out, "Did you hear? Jenna and Matt broke up." The words hit me strangely. Not with satisfaction. Not even surprise. Just dullness. Like hearing about two coworkers you used to know. I nodded, thanked her, and walked away. But inside, something shifted. The part of me that still held on to resentment started to loosen its grip. Not because they'd paid for what they did, but because it didn't matter anymore. They were no longer the main characters in my story. I was. It was almost a year to the day when Jenna reached out again. Her name lit up my phone screen like a ghost dragging its chains through a room I had finally begun to clean. I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering, heart steady but unsure. There was no anger anymore, just the weight of curiosity pressed against time. Against progress. I shouldn't have opened the message. But I did. It was long. Rambling. Carefully written, yet unmistakably desperate. She said she wasn't reaching out to rekindle anything, that she just needed to say a few things she never had the chance to. She talked about regret. About how she thought the fire between us had burned out only to realize later that what we had wasn't flames, it was foundation. She admitted to confusing passion with chaos, to confusing lust with validation. She said she missed the way I listened, the way I made her feel safe, that she hadn't felt that since. There was a time I would have clung to those words like a lifeline. A time when her validation would have cracked open every scar and left me begging for a second chance. But reading them now in the quiet of my new apartment, I felt something else. Not relief. Not longing. I felt done. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that caring and reconnecting were not the same thing. Forgiveness doesn't mean re-entry. Closure doesn't always require conversation. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is leave a message on read and move forward anyway. Matt never reached out again. And that, in a way, made more sense. I think he knew that no apology would be enough. That some friendships, once betrayed, don't just bend, they break clean. And no matter how much you might miss what was, you learn to honor the fracture. To let the silence speak for you. I found myself one evening sitting alone at a cafe with my journal open and a pen in hand. I wasn't writing about her anymore. I was writing about me. About what I wanted. About who I was becoming. For the first time, the pages weren't filled with questions about them. They were filled with answers about myself. I started reconnecting with old friends. Ones I had unintentionally drifted from while I was consumed by that relationship. We went for beers, hikes, late-night drives filled with music and half-baked philosophy. They didn't pry. Didn't press for gossip. They were just present. And I realized how much I had isolated myself during those years with Jenna, how often I had chosen her over everything else, thinking that was love. When really, it was dependency disguised as devotion. And then, slowly, life began to surprise me again. There was a girl, Alyssa. She worked in the same building as I did. Not someone I would have noticed before, back when I chased intensity like it was a drug. Alyssa was calm. Grounded. She smiled with her eyes and spoke with intention. We started talking over morning coffee, small interactions that stretched into laughter, then comfort. I didn't tell her about my past right away. I didn't need to. I wasn't trying to use her to fill a hole. I wasn't looking for a replacement. I was just open. And that was new. It felt like the first chapter of something different, not louder, not brighter, but real. Something that wasn't born from fireworks or desperation, but from quiet recognition. From the way two people can sit in silence and still feel heard. I wasn't healed. Not completely. I don't think anyone ever fully is. But I was healing. And that was enough. Alyssa wasn't a cure. She wasn't a magic solution or some savior story wrapped in affection. She was simply steady. And steady was exactly what I didn't know I needed. Our connection unfolded slowly, like pages turning with intention instead of being ripped in passion. With her, there was no guessing. No games. She listened, really listened, with the kind of presence that made me want to speak honestly, not just be heard. And maybe that's how I knew something real was forming, not because it felt overwhelming, but because it felt safe. I didn't tell her everything right away. Some wounds don't bleed in public. But over time, as our conversations deepened, I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't before. One rainy afternoon, while we sat by her window watching the world blur through the glass, I told her about Jenna. About Matt. About how betrayal doesn't just end relationships, it unroots your sense of reality. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just let the words come calm but raw. She didn't interrupt. Didn't pity me. When I was done, she simply said, "That must have been hell. But you're still standing." Those 5 words hit harder than any sympathy ever could. Because she wasn't reducing me to a victim. She was acknowledging my survival. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel proud, not just damaged. Not just someone recovering, but someone rebuilding. Things with Alyssa grew naturally. We didn't rush. No declarations. No grand gestures. Just consistent effort. She'd leave me notes in my lunch bag. I'd make her coffee before she woke up. We shared books, cooked dinner together, even started a Sunday tradition of walking through the local farmers' market hand in hand. And the longer I was with her, the more I realized how much of myself I had given away in my last relationship, how much I had bent to be enough for someone who was never satisfied. With Alyssa, I didn't feel the need to be perfect. I could be quiet. I could be tired. I could be real. And she didn't flinch. That steadiness, that unwavering presence, it gave me room to grow. Not for her, but for myself. One evening, we were sitting on my balcony, city lights flickering in the distance, when she asked me something I hadn't expected. "Do you ever miss them?" Her? Him? I took a breath. Let the question settle before answering. "No," I said truthfully. "But sometimes I miss who I was before it all happened. Before I knew how ugly people could be. Before I had to question everything. She nodded slowly, understanding without needing to pry. But look who you became because of it, she said. Maybe that version of you was softer, but this one is stronger. And that stayed with me. Because she was right. The pain had carved out parts of me, yes. But in that hollow space, something stronger had grown. Something clearer. I no longer chased chaos and called it passion. I no longer begged for love that came with conditions. I no longer mistook comfort for complacency. I had learned brutally, painfully, that not everyone who smiles at you has your best interest in mind. But I had also learned that once you survive betrayal, you carry with you a kind of clarity most people never find. It's not cynicism. It's wisdom. Earned. Fought for. And it changes how you love. For the better. As time moved on, I stopped keeping track of how long it had been since it all fell apart. There was a point when the dates mattered, when I could tell you exactly how many days had passed since I walked in on them, since I moved out, since she sent that final message. But eventually, the calendar lost its grip on me. Healing doesn't follow a schedule. It's not linear. Some mornings I woke up feeling whole, and by nightfall I was back inside the memory of that moment, her legs around him, his eyes meeting mine, the silence that followed like a death sentence. But those moments grew fewer, farther apart. And when they came, they no longer dragged me under. They simply passed. There's this myth we're sold that closure is something you're given. A conversation, an apology, a confession. But the truth? Closure is a decision. It's what you give yourself when you accept that you may never understand why someone hurt you the way they did. That there may never be a good enough reason. That sometimes people destroy you simply because they're too broken to care who they cut in the process of feeding their own emptiness. I had to teach myself that. I remember walking past a restaurant once, months after I thought I was over it, and seeing a couple that looked almost exactly like Jenna and Matt. Same build. Same dynamic. The girl was laughing, a head thrown back, eyes lit up, and the guy looked at her like she was his whole damn world. My body tensed instinctively. A phantom flash of betrayal, panic, grief. But then I blinked and they weren't them. Just strangers. Just people. And I realized then that my brain was still holding on to old ghosts, still scanning the world for shadows I had already outrun. I exhaled. Deeply. Let the moment pass. Kept walking. That's how healing looks sometimes. Not triumphant. Just quieter. I don't think I'll ever go back to who I was before. That version of me died in a living room I once called home. But the man I became, through all the wreckage, all the clawing my way back, he's someone I respect. Someone who learned to put down the weight of someone else's choices. Who stopped asking why and started asking what now. Alyssa and I had been together for almost 9 months when she brought up the idea of taking a weekend trip, just the two of us, no distractions. She wanted to see the mountains. To hike. To breathe air that wasn't laced with concrete and history. I hesitated at first. Not because I didn't want to go, but because the last trip I had planned with someone ended in betrayal. Trauma has a way of clinging to even the most unrelated things. But then she looked at me, that calm certainty in her eyes, and I realized I wasn't afraid of the past anymore. I just hadn't stopped to imagine a new future. So we went. The cabin was simple. A fireplace, a creaky bed, a view that stole the breath right out of your lungs. We hiked. We cooked together. We sat in silence without the pressure to fill it. One night, wrapped in blankets on the deck, stars spilled across the sky like spilled sugar, she reached for my hand and said, "You're different than most men I've met." I turned to her, unsure what she meant. You don't just talk. You listen. And you don't try to fix everything. You let things be hard without running away. I think that's what strength actually looks like. I didn't say anything right away. Her words settled somewhere deep inside me like roots finding untouched soil. Because I knew she was right. I was different. Not because of some miracle. But because pain had carved me into something deeper. More aware. Less reckless with hearts, including my own. And in that moment, looking out at the vast, silent night, I didn't feel like a man broken by betrayal anymore. I felt like a man who had rebuilt himself, piece by piece, into someone better. It wasn't until I ran into Jenna again that I realized how far I'd come. It wasn't planned. Life rarely gives you those kinds of warnings. I was grabbing lunch at a downtown spot I hadn't visited in years, just a random Tuesday, halfway through an ordinary day. And there she was. Standing at the counter, ordering something with almond milk and a complicated name. Her hair was shorter. She wore less makeup. But I recognized her instantly, like some muscle memory embedded in the bones. She didn't see me at first. I had every opportunity to walk away, to slip out unnoticed. But I didn't. Not out of spite. Not even out of curiosity. I stayed because I didn't feel fear anymore. I didn't feel hate. I felt detached. like I was watching a scene from an old film I used to know by heart. When she turned and spotted me, her body froze. Her eyes widened just a bit, then softened. I expected panic or guilt, but what I saw was something closer to mourning. A flicker of a shared past neither of us could fully erase. She stepped closer, tentative. "Hi," she said softly, like the word might shatter. "Hi," I replied, calm and steady. There was a beat of silence. The world around us buzzed with strangers and espresso machines, but we were caught